She said it into the microphone where everyone could hear, "Move, you useless pig!" The band stopped mid-note. Forks froze. My daughter-in-law didn't even look at me when she said it. She just flicked her wrist toward the head table like I was a stain to be wiped off the linen. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. It was a warm Saturday in Charleston, South Carolina. Late May, azaleas still bright on the terrace outside the Copper Lantern Hotel. The program card on my plate said 6:45 p.m., and the gold-ink timeline read, Toasts. I'd paid the $38,400 catering deposit with a cashier's check on April 10th. The carbon copy sat folded in my wallet because I like proof. My place card said, Mr. Alan Pierce, groom's father, not father of the groom. Small thing, but sharp, like a paper cut. "Dad, please," my son whispered, eyes down. "Just sit at the back for the photos." It's their aesthetic. That word again, aesthetic. It had crept into every excuse this past year. New locks, for the look. A bank transfer, for the decor. I wrote the checks because this house on Rutledge Avenue is my retirement, and my name is still on the title. But generosity can turn into erasure, and erasure has a sound. Laughter around a table while you stand there holding your chair. I slid the chair back in quietly. The carpet smelled of lemon cleaner. Ava turned toward the photographer and, off mic but loud enough, said, "He just stands there. He doesn't even know where to go." I knew exactly where to go. To my jacket pocket. I keep things. The catering contract with the 5 per guest corkage fee, circled in blue ink. The AV invoice for $2,815 stamped paid by A. Pierce. An email printout from the hotel manager thanking me again for my business. Again, because I'd held other events here. I know how rooms work and how people hide inside them. "Sir," the photographer said softly, "could you step to the side?" I stepped aside, not because of the insult, you never forget a word like that, but because my father once told me, a public fight is a private loss. Let them have the room. Let me have the record. At 7:02 p.m., the band started again. I stood near the bar and watched hands touch, hands take. One hand in particular, Ava's father, Leonard, patted his jacket pocket like a man guarding a winning ticket. He owned, or used to own, Low Country Maritime Logistics. I knew because years ago I'd quoted his son a better rate, and he'd told me not to play big. I let that go. Some lessons need a stage. A waiter passed with crab cakes. "Another drink, sir?" I looked at the glass in my hand. A highball I hadn't ordered that tasted faintly sweet, not soda sweet, but off. I set it down and asked for bottled water. The label peeled easily. I stuck it inside my notebook and wrote, Ava, Mike, useless pig, 7 p.m. People think revenge is fire. It's colder than that. It starts as a ledger. One line for the insult, one for the bill, one for the next name I'd soon hear, the man who had quietly bought Leonard's company 2 weeks earlier. When Ava raised her glass again for photos, I lifted mine and let the room blur. I thought of my late wife Ellen's handwriting on our mortgage, how she looped her E's and said, "Alan, humility isn't silence. It's choosing your moment." I chose. Mine when the terrace doors opened and the late sun lit up a face I recognized from a newspaper. Clipping in my desk drawer. A quiet man whose signature could move. Fleets, I hadn't planned this meeting. But when opportunity walks into your son's wedding, wearing a navy suit and a calm smile, you don't waste it. The wedding ended just before midnight, but my mind never left that moment at 7 p.m. when the word useless echoed through the speakers. Even when the music rose again and guests started dancing, it felt like I was standing in a tunnel. Sound on the outside, silence on the inside. The next morning, I found myself sitting at the edge of my bed in the guest room of my own house. They'd moved me there to make space for the newlyweds. The same walls Ellen and I painted 35 years ago were now lined with their boxes, clothes, designer bags, a set of gold-rimmed plates labeled registry gift. Ava's laughter floated from the kitchen downstairs. I could hear the blender, the clicking of heels, and my son saying, "Don't start, Ava." Then her reply, light and careless, "He'll get used to it." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just an insult at a wedding, it was a campaign. Small exclusions layered over time until they became erasure. I walked downstairs, past the family photos that had quietly disappeared from the walls, replaced by digital frames flashing their faces. My chair at the table had been moved. There was a new one, sleek, expensive, but not mine. My old oak chair was gone, and I didn't need to ask where. Ava looked up from her phone. "Morning, Alan," she said, not Dad. "Coffee?" Her tone was syrup-thick, polite on the surface. I nodded. The cup was already poured, milk swirling on top. My son's eyes flickered toward it, hesitant. "I'll get my own," I said, steady, and poured from the pot instead. That's when I saw the mail on the counter. 3 envelopes. One from the bank, one from a law office, and one thick white one with Low Country Maritime Logistics printed in the corner. Leonard's company. I picked it up. The corner had been torn open. Inside was a letter of sale, finalized just last week. The buyer's name wasn't visible, but the closing date was circled in blue ink. May 8th, 2 weeks before the wedding. I folded it quietly and slipped it into my notebook. Ava didn't notice. She was too busy filming her smoothie for Instagram. Later that day, my son came to the doorway of my room. He hesitated, like a boy about to apologize for something he didn't fully understand. "Dad," he said, "Ava didn't mean—" I stopped him with a look. "Don't explain your wife to me. You'll just learn to sound like her." He looked like he wanted to argue, but his phone buzzed. "It's work," he mumbled and walked out. After he left, I opened the top drawer of my desk. Inside was Ellen's old notebook, the one she used for house expenses. Every page had her looping handwriting, neat and certain. I flipped to the last page she ever wrote on. 3 months before she passed, "If you ever feel invisible, remember, paper remembers." That night, I pulled out every document I'd kept, receipts, contracts, emails. I started making a list, not of what I owned, but of what they thought I'd forgotten. Catering deposit, $30,400 audio invoice, $2,115. Deposit confirmation from Copper Lantern. Signed by me, letter of sale. Low Country Maritime Logistics. May 8 each item was a heartbeat. Proof that I still existed on paper, even if they pretended not to see me in person. Around 11:45 p.m., I stepped outside to the porch. The Charleston air was thick, humming with cicadas. Across the street, a car door slammed. Leonard's silver Mercedes. He got out, talking on the phone, his voice low but sharp. "I'll fix it before Monday," he said. He doesn't know yet. He didn't see me standing in the dark. He didn't know I had his company letter folded in my pocket. Back inside, I sat on the bed and thought about Ellen, about the house we built, the savings we planned, the retirement we never shared. I'd been living like a ghost, grateful to be tolerated. But ghosts can listen. Ghosts can remember. I wrote one line in my notebook before turning out the light. "They think I'm useless. They'll learn I'm essential." I didn't sleep much that night. The sound of laughter from downstairs faded around 1 a.m., replaced by the steady hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. It reminded me of something my lawyer once said when Ellen was sick. "Mr. Pierce, silence doesn't mean peace. It just means someone else is writing the story." By morning, I decided I'd start writing mine again. Monday morning, the Charleston air smelled like salt and coffee grounds. Ava and my son had left early for a post-wedding brunch with friends, leaving their dishes in the sink and the credit card receipt for a $486 champagne tab still lying on the counter. I folded it neatly, slid it into my notebook, and wrote one line under yesterday's entry. Every bill tells a story. At 8:30, I called the one person who'd never treated me like I was invisible. Gina Morales, my late wife's accountant. Gina had handled Ellen's estate and knew every corner of our finances. "Ellen," she said, voice firm as ever, "if you're calling this early, someone's crossed a line." "More than one," I replied. "Then start writing everything down. And don't move a cent until we talk." I drove downtown to her office on Meeting Street. The same brass letters still spelled Morales and Denton Financial. I parked beside the hydrant, walked in, and handed her my notebook. She flipped through, nodding at each receipt like a detective marking evidence. "The sale of Low Country Maritime, you said it was May 8th?" she asked. I opened the folded letter. Closing date circled in blue ink. She scanned it, whistled low. "You realize Leonard's company was bought by Millionaire Holdings?" "I do now." She turned her monitor. The headline on the local business page read, "Millionaire acquires Low Country Maritime in quiet. Deal." Underneath was a photo of a man in a navy suit, the same man who'd walked through those wedding doors as the sun hit the terrace. "His name's Richard Hale," she said. "Private investor. Owns most of the harbor storage contracts now." I leaned back. "Then he's the key." "To what?" "To making sure Leonard learns that I'm not as useless as his daughter says." That afternoon, I walked the waterfront, letting the plan take shape the way Ellen would have built a garden, one layer at a time. I didn't want chaos. I wanted proof. Revenge without evidence is just anger. With evidence, it's justice. Step 1 was information. I called the city records office and requested a copy of every payment tied to the Copper Lantern booking. Anything in my name. They said it would take 48 hours. I marked the date on a yellow pad. Wednesday, May 28th. Step 2 was presence. If they wanted me silent, I'd become unavoidable, but politely. I started spending my mornings at Leonard's favorite cafe, the Blue Heron on Broad Street, reading the Post and Courier at the corner table. I knew his schedule: 8:10 a.m. espresso, 8:25 call with his new partners. On Tuesday, he walked in, stopped when he saw me, then pretended to check his phone. I smiled, raised my cup, didn't speak. Sometimes silence says, "I know what you did." Step 3 was paper trails. That night, I searched Ellen's old safe. Combination 3/1862, our anniversary. Inside were 3 envelopes: our marriage certificate, a life insurance stub for $250,000, and the deed to the Rutledge Avenue house, still in both our names. The last page had a notarized clause Ellen had added. "In the event of my death, ownership remains solely with Alan Pierce, unless otherwise stated in writing." There had been no such statement. I underlined the sentence twice and made a copy. By Wednesday, the city clerk called back. "Mr. Pierce, you were the sole signatory on the wedding contract," she said. "We'll email confirmation." "That's perfect," I said. "And could you date stamp that copy for me?" "Of course." At 3:40 p.m. the same day, I saw Leonard's silver Mercedes parked outside Millionaire Holdings downtown. Through the glass, I caught a glimpse of Richard Hale, the man from the wedding, shaking his hand. Leonard looked strained, shoulders tight. Deals like that don't end with smiles. I walked inside. The receptionist looked up. "Mr. Hale's office. Do you have an appointment?" "Tell him Alan Pierce would like to thank him for the wedding venue." 5 minutes later, Hale came out himself. "You paid for the Copper Lantern event?" he asked. "I did," I said. "And I think we might share a common acquaintance, Leonard." He smiled, the kind of smile that hides calculation. "Interesting man. Sold me his company for half its worth." "Why do you ask?" "Because," I said, "his daughter called me a useless pig at her wedding. I figured someone should know where she learned that arrogance." Hale chuckled. "I'm guessing you'd like to teach a lesson." "Not teach," I said. "Correct the record." He extended a hand. "Consider it corrected. Leonard's on thin ice here anyway." As I left the building, the wind off the harbor felt colder. The plan was no longer abstract. By aligning with Hale, quietly, legally, I could ensure Leonard's fall would be public, undeniable, and perfectly timed. That night, I opened Ellen's notebook again. Under my new list of receipts, I wrote, Step 4, timing. Let them finish moving in before I move out. Of their lives. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. The house was silent except for the sound of my pen dropping into the drawer, a small click that felt like the start of justice. I woke on Thursday with a list and a cold sense of purpose. The insult at 7 p.m. had become a document trail. Dates, amounts, names. If revenge was to be fair and final, it would be quiet and surgical. I called Gina before breakfast. Bring everything you've got, she said. No emotion. Paper first. Gina came over with a stack of folders at 9:30. We sat in the sunroom that had once been Ellen's writing place, the blinds half closed so the room felt private. I laid out the receipts. The copper lantern deposit, $38,400. Cashier's check dated April 10th. The AV invoice for $2,000. $115 stamped paid by A. Pierce. The life insurance stub, $250,000. The Rutledge Avenue deed with Ellen's notarized clause. Next to them, the torn letter of sale for Low Country Maritime, the closing date circled. May 8th. Gina tapped the closing date and didn't look surprised. If Leonard sold on May 8th and the wedding was 2 weeks after, he was already offloading. There may be misrepresentations to his board, unpaid vendor liens, or even an undisclosed loan. We can't assume fraud, but there's enough to ask the right questions. She made calls. By noon, we had 3 things moving. A city-stamped copy of the wedding contract, arriving by email, a records request for any liens against Low Country Maritime, and a private investigator's number. I don't like private eyes, they feel dramatic. But a PI would legally photograph, document, and confirm facts that a sworn testimony could use later. Gina insisted. At 2 p.m., the PI arrived. Mark Fielder, 48, with tired eyes and a careful way of taking notes. He went through the documents like a surgeon. Lot of little gaps, he said. Vendors unpaid. A contractor complaining about delivered pallets not paid for. If Leonard was desperate to sell, people were bleeding. That evening, I made another practical call. To Millionaire Holdings' General Counsel. I didn't threaten. I asked questions. I explained who I was, Alan Pierce, local business owner, father of a groom at the Copper Lantern wedding, and that I had concerns about the sale of Low Country Maritime. He said he'd forward my concerns to Mr. Hale's office. I sent scanned copies of the AV invoice, the catering contract, and Ellen's deed with my underlined clause. Thursday night, Gina drafted a letter. Polite, fact-based, to Millionaire Holdings and to Leonard. It requested clarification on the sale and asked for confirmation that all vendor obligations had been met. She added one sentence I would later thank her for. We seek clarification to avoid misunderstandings that could affect community relationships. Dignity still matters. Always. On Friday, small things began to happen. The city clerk's email landed with the date-stamped wedding contract. April 10th listed as the deposit date. Catering headcount confirmed at 220 guests on May 22nd. The PI sent photos of unpaid pallets at Low Country's yard and a vendor invoice for $14,920 marked overdue. Mark also confirmed that a subcontractor had sent a mechanic's lien notice to Leonard's address on May 3rd, 5 days before the closing. That lien wasn't disclosed in the sale paperwork. I breathed in through the noise. Each piece fit. The unpaid supplier, the lien, the hurried closing on May 8th. Leonard may have sold the company without settling debts, an issue a buyer like Hale would not tolerate if he knew about it. Hale's firm depended on clean contracts. Saturday morning, I drove to Millionaire Holdings with Gina and the PI. We didn't storm in, We handed a folder to Hale's assistant and asked for a 10-minute meeting. Hale agreed. He looked at the folder and at me in turn, the same cool, small smile from the wedding. He read the vendor invoice, the lien notice, the photos Mark had taken. "This is troubling," he said into the quiet. If there are undisclosed liabilities, Low Country's value was misrepresented. He set the documents down. "We acquired the assets in good faith. We'll investigate immediately." I felt no triumph, only a steady, old kind of relief. Legal consequences take time, but they also make the truth public. Hale asked Leonard to supply all sale paperwork and vendor reconciliation by Monday. If Leonard couldn't, Millionaire would put a temporary freeze on certain transfers until the books balanced. By Sunday, I started to see the social threads twitch. Vendors I'd known for years, plasterers, caterers, longshore workers, sent messages like small warnings. "We need our money. We've been calling." My son's texts were shorter now. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer. That night, I sat on the back steps with Ellen's notebook open and wrote down a ledger that mattered. Money flows, dates, and who held what. Catering deposit, $38,400. Cashier's check. Upper 10 in my wallet copy. AV invoice, $28.15. Paid by A. Pierce. Hotel records. Low Country sale, May 8th. Buyer, Millionaire Holdings, Richard Hale. Vendor invoice, $14,920. Overdue. Mechanics lien filed May 3rd. Rutledge deed. Notarized clause in Ellen's handwriting. Copy with me. PI photos and vendor statements with Mark Fielder. City-stamped wedding contract. Emailed May 27th. The ledger felt like a map. If Leonard had cut corners, Hale would find them. If Hale found them, Leonard would be forced to answer in front of people who mattered. Partners, clients, the local press. That would be the boardroom moment I was preparing for. I placed the ledger back in the notebook and closed it slow. There is a moral in every account. You can ignore a man's presence, but not his paperwork. Paper remembers. And when paper speaks in public, people listen. When I turned off the porch light, my phone buzzed once. An unknown number. A brief message. "We saw your folder." "Thank you, RH." I smiled and put the phone away. The next week would not be quiet. By Monday, the air in the house felt different. Thin, watchful, like someone had turned the temperature down without touching the thermostat. Ava and my son moved around me carefully now, their laughter quieter, their whispers shorter. Something had reached them, not from me, but from outside. At 8:15 a.m., my phone rang. Gina's name lit up. "It's starting," she said. Millionaire Holdings froze the remaining payout to Leonard until the lien issue is cleared. I didn't smile, not even inside. I only said, "Then it's working." That same morning, my son came into the kitchen in a wrinkled shirt, tie half-tied. "Dad, did you talk to Mr. Hale?" he asked, cautious. I folded the newspaper slowly. "I did. Why?" "Because Leonard called me at 6 a.m., said someone's been digging into his business. He's furious. Maybe he should have paid his vendors," I said. Ava appeared behind him, her tone sharp. "You went behind my father's back?" "No," I said evenly. "He went behind the laws." The silence stretched long enough to hear the fridge hum. Then Ava's voice rose, brittle and tight. "You think this makes you look smart? You've embarrassed our family." "Our family," I said quietly, "was embarrassed the night you took a microphone and called me a useless pig." My son looked down, torn between us. "Dad, please!" "Not now." I didn't argue. I picked up my notebook and left for the porch. That evening, Gina called again. "Alan, the investigation's widening. Hale's legal department found that Leonard withdrew nearly $200,000 from company funds a week before the sale. Personal account. No documentation. That's embezzlement territory." I took a slow breath. "Does Hale plan to act?" "He doesn't have to. The numbers will speak for themselves. But he'll be calling a board review by Thursday. Thursday! I underlined the date in my notebook. The next 2 days stretched like wire. Leonard's calls came twice, both ignored. My son sent one text. "Dad, please don't make this worse." I wrote back only, "Truth isn't worse, it's heavier." On Wednesday, I stopped by the Blue Heron Cafe again. Leonard was there, pacing by the window, his phone pressed tight to his ear. "You can't freeze funds like that," he snapped. "I've got obligations." Then he turned, saw me, and the color drained from his face. I didn't speak, just raised my coffee cup. He left in a rush. The waiter looked at me with quiet curiosity. "Everything okay, Mr. Pierce?" "Better than ever," I said. That night, I set the stage for what Ellen used to call the polite ending. Revenge isn't shouting. It's signing. I gathered every document, the lien notice, the city-stamped contract, the catering invoice, and Ellen's deed clause, and placed them in a manila folder marked Private for legal disclosure. I'd already arranged for Gina to deliver duplicates to Hale's board secretary before the Thursday review. I also sent one email, calm, factual, and precise, to my son. Subject: for your clarity. Everything I've done is documented and lawful. The copper lantern payments, the sale records, the lien notices, all verified. I don't want conflict, only acknowledgement. You once said I didn't know how to protect family. I'm doing that now, he didn't reply. But late that night, I heard his car door slam and his footsteps pause outside my door. Then quietly, he said through the wood, "I'm sorry, Dad." I didn't answer. Some apologies are best left to settle overnight. Thursday morning arrived gray and damp, thunder threatening rain. The board review was scheduled for 11 a.m. I stayed home. I didn't need to attend. Truth doesn't require an audience to work. At 11:43, Gina called. "It's done," she said. Hale confronted him in front of the entire board. The unpaid liens, the withdrawals, the falsified expense sheets, all confirmed. Leonard tried to blame a junior accountant. Hale didn't buy it. "What happens now?" I asked. "He's suspended pending audit. They'll release an internal notice to stakeholders. It'll be public within a week." I sat back in Ellen's chair and looked out at the rain slicking down the window. Every insult has its echo. This one had reached the exact right ears. That afternoon, I found the wedding photo album on the counter. A note was tucked inside in Ava's handwriting. "We're staying with Dad for a few days." I turned the album open. The first photo was of the moment she'd raised the microphone. She looked radiant, confident, certain she was winning. I closed the book. "You were right about one thing," I murmured. "You did marry up, just not the way you think." Outside, the rain eased. In the distance, a thunderclap rolled like applause. Thursday evening, Charleston felt like it was holding its breath. The rain had passed, but the streets still shimmered with puddles that caught the glow of street lamps. I sat at the desk in Ellen's old study, the same one she used to balance our checkbooks on, watching the cursor blink on a blank email draft. I had promised myself I wouldn't gloat. Justice works better when you let it travel on its own. But part of justice is presence, being there when the truth finally shows its face. At 6:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. "You might want to see this yourself." Gina never wasted words. I grabbed my jacket and the small black notebook that had followed me through every act of this mess. 20 minutes later, I walked into the glass lobby of Mariner Holdings. The air smelled of fresh coffee and carpet glue, expensive, temporary things. A young receptionist looked up from her screen. "Mr. Pierce? They're still in session, but Mr. Hale said you could wait." I could hear voices echoing from behind the frosted conference room wall. Raised, then flattened again by professionalism. When the door finally opened, I saw Leonard standing at the end of the table, face gray, tie loosened. Across from him sat Richard Hale, arms folded, the documents Gina had delivered spread out like evidence in a courtroom. Hale's voice carried the calm that frightens people more than shouting. We have invoices dated May 3rd. We have lien notices unreported before closing. We have transfers to your personal account totaling $198,000. He looked up. Anything you'd like to clarify? Leonard's jaw worked. Those were reimbursements, legitimate operating costs. Operating costs, Hale repeated, flipping a page. For a wedding catering company? Silence. The board members shifted in their seats. One cleared his throat. Hale continued, Mr. Pierce, thank you for coming. You financed that event, correct? I did. Would you confirm this signature? He turned the copper lantern contract toward me. My blue ink initials glowed under the light. That's mine, Hale nodded. Then we can close that loop. Leonard tried to recover his footing. You don't understand. He's twisting this. Leonard, Hale said quietly, if you continue, you'll be under oath sooner than you think. The words landed like a verdict. Leonard sank into his chair. I didn't speak again until Hale looked directly at me. Mr. Pierce, we appreciate your transparency. You may rest assured this company will correct every liability your evidence uncovered. You've done more for this merger's integrity than any audit firm could have. I nodded once. Just wanted the record straight. Behind me, a door opened, and there they were. My son and Ava. She was pale under the fluorescent light, her phone clutched like a weapon that had stopped working. My son looked younger than I'd seen him in years. Dad, he said quietly. What is this? Reality, I said. You might remember it. It starts where pride ends, Ava stepped forward. You humiliated my father. No, I said, meeting her eyes. He did that himself. I just kept the receipts. Hale cleared his throat gently, signaling that the meeting was over. As Leonard and his daughter turned to leave, Hale extended his hand to me. Mr. Pierce, I'd like to discuss a small investment opportunity if you have time next week. You seem to understand accountability. I'll think about it, I said. In the hallway, Leonard brushed past me without looking up. Ava followed, tears streaking through her makeup. My son lingered for a moment. I didn't know, he said. I believe you, I answered. But you should have wanted to know. Outside, the evening air hit me like a reset. Cars hissed through the wet streets, and somewhere a jazz band played from an open door. I walked 2 blocks to the Blue Heron Cafe, Poetic Symmetry, and ordered black coffee. The same waiter from before looked up. Rough night? He asked. No, I said. Necessary night. I took the notebook from my pocket and drew a single line across the last page. Ledger closed. When I got home, the house was silent. Their suitcases were gone. On the kitchen counter sat a note in my son's handwriting. We need time. Mark. I folded it once and slipped it between Ellen's pages. At 9:30 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from Gina. Local business journal goes to print at midnight. Headline, Investor exposes hidden liabilities in low country sale. You're quoted anonymously. I turned off the phone and stood by the window. Charleston's harbor lights shimmered like small, patient eyes. Somewhere out there, Leonard was explaining to someone why the word useless would never feel the same again. I whispered Ellen's old line aloud. Humility isn't silence. It's choosing your moment. Mine had come and passed, leaving the kind of stillness that only truth can buy. By Monday morning, Charleston had already heard the story. The Low Country Ledger ran it on page 1. Local business sale under investigation. Unreported debts surface after acquisition. The article didn't mention my name, but everyone who mattered could read between the lines. An anonymous source provided financial records indicating unpaid vendor liens and misused funds prior to the sale. I sat on the porch with my coffee and watched the delivery man toss the paper onto the neighbor's lawn. It was strange how quiet victory sounded. No applause, no cheers, just a bird call somewhere beyond the magnolia tree. By noon, my son's car pulled up to the curb. He didn't honk this time. He walked up the steps slowly, like a man entering a confession booth. He didn't knock. He just stood there. "Dad," he said, "it's bad." "I know." They're freezing Dad's accounts. The board suspended him, and Mom's terrified. "Ava? She's not talking to anyone." I took a sip of coffee. Maybe silence will do her some good. He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. For everything. I thought you were being bitter, but you were just right." "Being right is overrated," I said. "Being respected lasts longer." He sat on the step next to me. For a long moment, we didn't talk. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint scent of sea salt and cut grass. "Dad," he said finally, "what do you want me to do?" "Learn," I said. "Not from me, from what you've seen. Learn the difference between family and ownership." That evening, a letter arrived by courier. The envelope bore the Millionaire Holdings seal. Inside was a single sheet on company letterhead. "Dear Mr. Pierce, following our internal review, Millionaire Holdings has initiated corrective measures and appreciates your cooperation in safeguarding the integrity of this transaction. Please accept our thanks. Should you ever consider joining our advisory board, my office would welcome the conversation." Richard Hale below, the signature was a short handwritten note. "Charleston needs more men like you." I placed the letter inside Ellen's notebook. Every page of that notebook now held a different part of the same story. Receipts, contracts, a line of ink under each date. Every wrong turned right in black and white. 2 days later, a box arrived from Leonard's house. No return address, just a white label with my name. Inside were my old photos. Ellen and me in front of the first house we ever owned. My son at graduation. Even the carved wooden frame that used to hang in the living room before Ava redecorated everything. I ran my thumb along the edge of the glass and smiled faintly. Revenge, I realized, doesn't give you back what you lost. It just gives you space to stand in peace again. That night, I sat in Ellen's chair, turned on the small desk lamp, and opened my notebook to the last page. Under the final ledger line, I wrote one more entry. June 3rd. House quiet. Bank accounts balanced. Dignity restored. Then, below it, in Ellen's looping script, copied from memory, I wrote the words she always said, whenever life corrected itself in its own quiet way. "You didn't lose me. You gave me away." I closed the notebook. Outside, the city hummed in the soft summer dark, and for the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a guest in my own family, not as a burden or a background, but as the man who had finally learned that silence only has value when it's broken at the right time. By the end of the week, truth had done what I never could. It spoke for itself. Millionaire Holdings filed a formal complaint with the State Commerce Board. Leonard's suspension became a resignation, effective immediately. The press called it a quiet exit after audit irregularities. I called it closure. I didn't go looking for it, but people started finding me anyway. The phone rang more that week than it had in months. Vendors, accountants, even a lawyer from Hale's firm. Each of them said the same words in different ways. "Thank you for coming forward." They thought I'd done it for them. I hadn't. I did it for the man who'd been told, in front of 100 people, that he was useless. Charleston's gossip circuits spun faster than the ceiling fans in July. At the barber shop, 2 men whispered about that logistics scandal. One said, "They say a family member tipped them off." I didn't correct him. Sometimes justice doesn't need credit, only memory. On Sunday morning, I went to St. Michael's for the first time since Ellen's funeral. The same pew, the same window light. The choir sang, "Abide with me." I didn't pray for revenge anymore. I prayed for balance, that everyone involved would learn what it costs to confuse kindness with weakness. When I got home, my son's car was in the driveway again. He was alone this time. He didn't say much, just held out an envelope. Inside was a personal check made out to me for $38,400. "It's the catering," he said quietly. "Ava insisted we repay you." I folded the check and put it back in his hand. "You keep it. Pay the people your father-in-law still owes." He looked at me, eyes rimmed red. "You're a better man than I ever was." "No," I said. "Just older. Time makes you stop fighting for approval and start fighting for truth." He nodded, like a boy who'd finally understood a language he'd refused to learn. Before leaving, he stopped at the door. "She said she wants to apologize someday." "When she learns what that word means," I replied. That evening, I walked through the house, my house, and it felt different. No tension in the air, no hidden conversations through walls. I opened the cabinet and took out Ellen's favorite teacup, the one with the chipped rim she refused to throw away. I filled it with hot water, set it beside the window, and watched the harbor glow in the distance. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Hale. "Alan, we'd like you to attend next quarter's board reception. I want people to see what accountability looks like when it wears a kind face." I smiled. I wasn't a crusader, just a man who refused to let disrespect become the final entry in his story. I turned off the lamp, and the room sank into a peaceful half-dark. Ellen's photo on the mantel caught the last of the streetlight. I whispered, "I did it right this time." For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own house. Justice hadn't come roaring in with fists. It had arrived in envelopes, in signatures, in the silence of those who had once laughed the loudest. And as I closed my eyes that night, one truth lingered in my mind like a benediction. Revenge burns hot, but justice endures quiet, and forever. I used to think revenge was a flame that burned out when the other person fell. But when the dust finally settled, I learned something far colder, far truer. Revenge isn't about their downfall. It's about your restoration. It's about looking in the mirror and recognizing the man you were before they made you doubt him. The following week, Charleston's summer settled in heavy and slow. Cicadas sang from dawn till dusk, the air thick enough to drink. I spent my mornings on the porch with a pen and notebook, finishing the same ledger that started it all. Every name, every date, every check mark had led to this moment of stillness. The ink didn't tremble anymore when I wrote. I had expected relief to feel loud, triumphant. Instead, it was soft, the kind that sneaks up in the sound of a spoon against a coffee mug, or the sight of sunlight through old lace curtains. The kind that whispers, "You made it out," without losing yourself. One afternoon, Gina stopped by with a folder and her usual calm smile. "Everything's finalized," she said. "The case is closed. Mariner's releasing their statement next week." I poured her tea in Ellen's chipped cup. "You did good, Ellen," she said. "You didn't just prove them wrong, you did it the right way." "Ellen used to say," I replied, "if you ever want to win, don't swing. Document." Gina laughed softly. "You should frame that one." After she left, I went through Ellen's notebook one last time. Between the financial ledgers and contracts were her grocery lists, phone doodles, and a few lines she'd scribbled years ago. The worst heartbreak is not when they forget you. It's when you forget yourself trying to be seen. I'd lived that line without realizing it. Every insult I swallowed, every room I stepped out of to keep the peace, had been a slow forgetting. This revenge wasn't against Leonard or Ava. It was against my own silence. That evening, I walked down to the harbor, the same place where Ellen and I used to sit after Sunday service and talk about small things, the weather, the neighbors, what color to paint the kitchen. I watched a freighter crawl across the horizon, its lights reflecting off the water like floating stars. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the world was passing me by. I was part of it again. My son called later that night. Dad, I've been thinking, he said. When all this started, I kept asking why you didn't fight back sooner. And now I understand. You were waiting for the moment when they'd expose themselves. I smiled at the quiet maturity in his voice. You'll get there too. Just remember, son, anger makes noise, but truth makes history. We talked for an hour, mostly about nothing, which felt like everything. Before hanging up, he said, Ellen would have been proud. She already is, I told him. You just have to live long enough to hear it. When I finally went to bed, the house didn't echo anymore. It breathed, the refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and for once, it sounded like company instead of emptiness. I lay there thinking about that night at the Copper Lantern, the laughter, the insult, the way everyone froze. I realized something I hadn't before. Ava didn't ruin that night. She revealed it. She showed me what I'd built my peace on. Approval from people who only saw the surface. And once someone shows you that, it can't hurt you again. I closed my eyes and whispered the same words I'd written at the bottom of Ellen's last page. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. Only this time, I wasn't saying it to her. I was saying it to myself. A month passed before anyone said the word wedding again. The Copper Lantern had hosted another reception since then, but people still remembered the last one. The one where a bride's father fell from grace, and an old man who'd been called useless quietly rewrote the ending. Charleston moved on, as cities do, but my house on Rutledge Avenue changed in ways I hadn't expected. It didn't feel haunted anymore. The air carried no tension, only the smell of polished wood and old coffee. For the first time in years, I started sleeping through the night. My son called more often. Sometimes it was just to tell me about work, or to ask what I was cooking. Other times it was heavier. Ava's trying to fix things, he said once. She started seeing a therapist. She says she finally understands what she did. Understanding and changing are two different currencies, I said gently. I know, but it's a start. He was right. It was a start. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't erase the past. It just stops it from owning your next breath. One Saturday, I drove down to the Copper Lantern for lunch. The maitre d' recognized me instantly. Mr. Pierce, he said with a respectful nod. Your usual corner table? I hadn't been there since that night. The same chandeliers hung overhead, polished and bright, as if nothing had happened. But everything had. I ordered Ellen's favorite, grilled salmon with lemon butter, and when the waiter poured my water, he smiled. It's good to see you again, sir. You too, I said. This place still feels like a story waiting to end well. As I ate, I thought about all the things revenge had cost me. Time, peace, sleep. But it had also bought me something rare. Clarity. I had learned the exact price of silence and the value of keeping a record. Not every battle is fought with words. Some are fought with signatures, receipts, and the courage to stop being afraid of your own evidence. After lunch, I took a walk down to the pier. The water glittered, restless and honest. I could still hear Ellen's voice sometimes, soft but steady. Ellen, humility doesn't mean bowing. It means knowing your worth without proving it every minute. I sat on the bench we used to share and opened my notebook for the final time. There were no more numbers left to write, only thoughts. On the last page, I wrote, July 2nd. Peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from surviving your own restraint. I closed the cover and looked out at the boats rocking in the harbor. A seagull landed on the railing, eyed my empty plate, and flew off again. Even the smallest things, I realized, knew when to take what they needed and move on. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed with a message from my son. Dad, We're hosting dinner next Sunday. Ava asked if you'd come. No speeches, just family. I didn't answer right away. I let the sound of the waves decide for me. Then I typed back, "I'll come." But tell her, this time, I'm sitting at the head of the table. The sun dipped low, coloring the harbor gold. I walked back to my car, leaving the copper lantern glowing behind me. Revenge had done its job. Justice had balanced the books. What remained was life, quieter, humbler, but undeniably mine again. The next Sunday arrived with quiet sunlight and the smell of fresh-cut grass. I ironed a clean shirt, something I hadn't done for anyone in years, and left the house at 6. My son's neighborhood was only 20 minutes away, but it felt like another country. Freshly painted porches, kids on bikes, neighbors who waved like they meant it. When I walked up to the door, it opened before I could knock. Ava stood there. No makeup, no sparkle, no microphone, just a plain white dress and eyes that didn't know where to look. "Mr. Pierce," she said softly. "Dinner's ready." Inside, the table was simple. No champagne flutes or silver chargers, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and one empty chair at the head. Mine. My son motioned for me to sit there. I hesitated, then did. Ava set a plate in front of me. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. "For that night. For everything. I thought power meant control. I was wrong." I looked at her for a long time. "It takes strength to admit you were cruel. But remember, cruelty always comes from fear." She nodded. "I was afraid you'd take him away from me." I smiled faintly. "You can't lose someone who isn't a possession." Dinner passed quietly. No toasts, no cameras, just conversation. It was the first time I'd heard my son laugh freely in months. When dessert came, a small slice of Ellen's favorite lemon pie, I almost couldn't taste it through the knot in my throat. For once, peace felt heavier than pain. After dinner, Ava walked me out to the porch. "He told me what you said, about the head of the table." "I didn't mean it as a demand," I said. "Just a reminder of where I used to belong." "You still do," she whispered. "If you'll have us." I looked up at the stars, the same ones Ellen used to trace with her finger when the nights were long and money was short. "Forgiveness," I said slowly, "isn't something you give. It's something you stop withholding." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and went back inside. I stood there for a while, the air cool against my skin, the sound of dishes clinking faintly through the door. Then I walked to my car and looked back once. Through the window I could see them laughing, my son's hand resting on her shoulder, the light falling softly over both their faces. That's when it hit me. I hadn't destroyed their world. I'd rebuilt mine. As I drove home, I thought about that night at the Copper Lantern. The laughter, the insult, the way everyone looked away. I realized the irony of it all. The word meant to humiliate me had become the stone I built my dignity on. Useless pig. The insult that gave me purpose. By the time I reached Rutledge Avenue, the harbor lights were glowing like scattered coins. I parked, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a minute. My reflection stared back at me in the window. Older, sharper, but unbroken. I whispered, half to Ellen, half to myself. "You were right. Justice isn't loud. It's patient." Then I went inside, placed my notebook on the shelf beside her photograph, and turned off the lamp. The house exhaled, quiet, warm, alive again. And that's how it ends. Not with applause or revenge served cold. Just with an old man reclaiming the peace that was his all along. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't payback. it's peace.